Oh gosh, look at the crowd.
Come this way.
Those who spread goodness radiate happiness to everyone around them. Introducing LOLC Finance Credit Cards. Fuel the goodness in you.
This is LMDtv. I'm Fazmina Imamudeen. Joining with us is Ashane Jayasekara.
Good evening, Fazmina.
Could you cite two of the most critical pros and cons from the interim budget?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be on this program. The Prime Minister, of course, now the President, Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe, had to present his budget proposals in a very challenging economic environment. At a macroeconomic level, of course, the Prime Minister acknowledges the need for structural reforms which need to be done in order to achieve economic stability and growth. Of course, we must understand that this budget does not promote or encourage business growth. What it does is it encourages or strengthens the economic recovery of the country. It creates a sort of fiscal and economic platform which would bolster the medium to long-term economic growth of the country. He also indicated in his interim budget that the IMF agreement, the 2023 budget proposals which will be set out in November, will set a roadmap for this. He also stated that the country needs a national economic policy for at least a period of 25 years. Now, Sri Lanka has been lacking this medium to long-term stability in our policy. So it's good to note that the government has acknowledged this. Then on the fiscal side, there are certain targets which have been set. Revenue tax to GDP. Pre-COVID, of course, this was around 13%. Today, it's less than 8%. If you look at the developed countries like the USA, it's about 25%. The UK, it's around 30%. Closer to home, Malaysia, Singapore, the tax revenue to GDP is around 14 to 15%. So the government has finally set a target of 15% by 2025. Then on the budget deficit, budget surplus, a target of 2% surplus by 2025. Then on the public debt to GDP, which is at around 110%, the government has set a target of 100%. This, of course, they hope to achieve in the medium term. So these targets are very ambitious, but if there is political will, proper administrative support, genuine reforms, if they are implemented, these targets can be achieved. So those are the pros. Now, if you look at the negative side of the budget, these budgets have many proposals which will increase the tax revenue. And this will put a very heavy burden on the people. For example, the corporate income tax, which was around 24%, will be increased to 30%. If you look at the individual income tax from 18% to 32%, VAT from 8 to 12, and now from 1st October, it will be 15%. So given the high inflation, the hike in prices of goods and services, no doubt all these taxes would result in a further increase in goods and services. Of course, there is one good thing that the IMF wants us to do. They have acknowledged that the vulnerable sections in our society need to be protected. So they have informed the government that they need to provide a good social security net for the low-income earners. Then very recently in the revised estimates presented by the government, if you look at the revenue side, there is a bit of a reduction, I think 5 to 10% on the revenue side. But on the government expenditure side, estimated expenditure for 2022, you see about a 15% increase. Now, of course, this increase is due to subsidies and salaries and all that. But the government needs to make a very conscious effort to reduce government expenditure as well, because finding the funds for this is not going to be easy. If we cannot bridge the gap, the last resort we may have would be to print money. And we all know that if that occurs, the prices of goods will go up even further.
There's some confusion about whether or not the pay system will be reintroduced. Could you shed some light on this?
Right. So in May 2022, the Prime Minister's office released a press release, and based on that, withholding tax will be imposed on employment income. So earlier on, it was voluntary, but if your salary on a monthly basis, if it exceeds 150,000 a month, you would most likely be required to pay monthly income tax. Of course, we never know until the bill is passed in Parliament and signed off by the Speaker. It is not confirmed, but we believe that from the 1st of October this year, this tax, payee tax, will be implemented.
Will the Inland Revenue Department be able to cope with the administrative burden of registering all citizens above 18 years, in your view? If
Yes.
so, how?
Well, in 2018, the government made an egregious mistake. They increased the tax thresholds to 3 million. They took the VAT threshold to 300 million per annum. And this resulted in approximately 35 to 45% loss in taxpayers. So when increasing tax revenue to the government, I mean, they have two choices. One is to raise the tax rates. The other one is to broaden the tax base. So now in Sri Lanka, we have about 20 odd million population. And if you look at the statistics, there are only about 300,000 individuals registered for income tax, right? This is about maybe less than 2% of the population. So we clearly need to expand the base if we are to increase the tax revenue to the government. So the proposal is to reduce the tax-free allowance from 3 million to 1.8 million and make payee tax mandatory, as I mentioned before. So the thinking behind registering all citizens above 18 is correct. As citizens, we need to contribute to the tax revenue. However, administratively, how well this can be implemented is in question. In my view, they will have to make use of advanced technologies to achieve this sort of goal. Now, the other thing that they need to do is they may even need to link up the systems in the land registry, in the customs, in the RMV, to capture all this data on transactions, the income data of individuals. This needs to be done. However, even though you may have to register if you are 18 years or above that, we believe that a tax return may have to be filed only if you exceed the tax thresholds. So it's a good thing that they are getting citizens to register, but administering it is going to be a little cumbersome and tedious.
What concrete steps should be taken to address tax evasion?
Yes, very recently a tax amnesty was granted. I think from the mid-1960s, we've had 15 to 16 tax amnesties issued by the government. However, these have not been very successful. I was told that the most recent one, the estimated tax revenue was around 500 million, but they've achieved only 30% of that. And for law-abiding taxpayers, it certainly demotivates them when these sort of tax amnesties are granted. Another way in which tax evasion could be tackled is focusing on data collection, especially income data is crucial in addressing tax evasion. So we need a robust data collection system, not only at the Inland Revenue Department, but also at other state institutions as well. And the key is that all these systems need to talk to each other, right? Feed into each other. So the officers at the Inland Revenue also, they perform audits, they take recovery action, but it's a very long drawn process, and it really does not deter offenders. Therefore, I think one solution is to use technology to capture data on income of professionals, and this could be used to reduce tax evasion to the greatest extent possible.
Do you think it is fair that people earning 150,000 rupees a month will soon come within the personal tax threshold, given the skyrocketing cost of living? Shouldn't we be taxing high income earners more instead?
Well, they do. I mean, if you look at the income tax rates, they are progressive. The tax-free allowance has been reduced to 1.8 million, and then above that in brackets of 1.2 million, and in multiples of 4, they tax. So the more you earn, the tax rate is higher. So the highest tax rate is about 32%, and if you earn more than 10.2 million a year, you will be taxed at that. So it's a progressive tax rate. But if there are indirect taxes, for example, some like social contribution security, which they plan to implement in October, and the VAT 15%. These are indirect taxes, which are levied at the same rate, 15% and 2.5%, irrespective of the income of the taxpayer. So in that sense, indirect taxes are regressive. Direct taxes are progressive, and the biggest structural issue that we have, if you look at the ratio of direct taxes to indirect taxes, it's 20 to 80%. So you need to change this ratio. If you can increase the direct tax component, it will be a little more equitable. And we must also not forget there is a withholding tax on dividend income and interest income. Dividend income, I think it's around 14%. On interest, it's about 5%. These taxes are also the same, irrespective of the income levels of the taxpayers. So the government needs to gradually increase the direct to indirect tax components.
What is your take on the removal of the VAT exemption on residential apartments, given the importance of the construction industry and the challenges it is facing?
Well, if the tax exemption on the VAT exemption on the sale of condominium apartments or construction industry is removed, naturally, the prices of apartments, for example, will go up by 15%. Now, you add to that the cost of raw materials, right, which are imported, and due to the exchange rate, the depreciation of the Sri Lankan currency, and due to the shortages and restrictions on imports, the prices will go up further. But this problem will mainly, I believe, be faced by local local investors. If you are a foreigner and you are paying in dollars, then of course the exchange rate depreciation will help you, right? I mean, if you're paying it in dollars, you can get more rupees out of it. Then, so therefore, I think we need to look at this from a more macroeconomic perspective than from a price point of view. If the port city, for example, kicks off or takes off, if there is more economic activity, the demand for these residential units will increase. And so therefore, I feel that we need to focus more on the broader picture in making Sri Lanka more attractive for foreign investors.
What incentives, if any, are there to attract the foreign investments that we desperately need?
Well, of course, currently we are not in a position to offer tax incentives given the very low tax revenue to GDP. So we are not in a position to give tax holidays and tax incentives. And if you look at the research that has been carried out in this area for the last 10 or so years, the FDI, the amounts, they've been ranging from 300 million to maybe 700 million. I think in 2017, it went up to about 1.3, 2018, because of the Hambantota lease port payment, we got about 1.8. And now back again, we are below 500 million in terms of FDI. So these tax holidays have really not worked well. And if you look at the kinds of FDIs that have flown into the country, 30 to 40%, I believe, is in the real estate sector. So this is the sector, the shopping malls, the shopping complexes, office spaces. I mean, is this the sector where we would like to see FDIs? Shouldn't it be in more advanced, technologically more advanced industries, which will help to expand or increase our exports? So we got to look at this. And in my view, if you are a foreign investor, the tax incentive or the tax holidays, the last thing you think about. I mean, there are so many other problems such as political instability, inconsistency in the policies, the tax policies, archaic labor laws, infrastructure-related issues, bribery and corruption. Then you have red tape, right? I mean, setting up a company, repatriating your profits once you set it up is a nightmare. Then what is our rank in the ease of doing business? Look at our trade laws. All these things need to be reformed, and this is an opportune time to do this. So we need to address those rather than giving tax holidays and tax incentives to bring in FDIs. I think that is more important than giving tax incentives.
As for import levies, what changes are in the pipeline?
Right. Now, the Prime Minister, in one of his speeches, I cannot remember whether this was in the press release or in the interim budget, stated that there was the Presidential Commission on Inquiry, PCOI. They carried out a review of the Sri Lanka customs, and this report was handed over to the former president. Now, based on this report, there were a lot of recommendations made to strengthen the administrative and operational processes of Sri Lanka customs. So we hope that those proposals will be implemented so that operations and the customs will be more efficient and effective. Then on the other side, I think in the interim budget, there was acknowledgement of the need to reform our para tariffs, right, to gradually phase this out to facilitate trade. So I hope that these two will be implemented soon.
The SME sector is up in arms, saying that the interim budget fails to address the plight of a sector that accounts for more than 50% of the GDP and employs more than 4 million people. How do you view this criticism?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the SME sector contributes, as you said, 50% of our GDP, and I think 50% of employees are in that sector. Right? I think about 90% of our companies registered in Sri Lanka are in the SME sector. So the SME sector, as you very correctly pointed out, is a very important segment of the economy, and it contributes significantly to the economy, right? So if you look at the tax rates that are offered to small and medium-scale enterprises, there's a concessionary rate, right? This is, I think, 14%, but there are plans to increase it to about 15% with effect from October. Then there are certain industries in the SME sector like travel, tourism, who are adversely impacted given the crisis in the country. And then you have certain other sectors like shipping, export companies that are performing well. So I think the bigger problems in the SME sector stem from the dollar shortage, the rampant inflation, the depreciation of the rupee. So the government needs to address these areas first. They have to take a more of a holistic view on this rather than trying to address it on a piecemeal basis. So we need to overhaul the entire system. As I mentioned to you before, there are other kinds of reforms that are required other than just tax incentives and reforms in itself.
What are your expectations for the 2023 budget, which is to be presented in November?
Right. So a key issue in Sri Lanka's economic policy was the lack of stability. So as I mentioned earlier, I would like the government to reiterate. I would like to see a long-term policy statement which is well thought out and rational. So commitment to this would be nice to see. And also we need technically sound people making decisions about the economy. We don't want politicians to influence this. So in that sense, it would be best if the central bank could be made more independent and be depoliticized. The BOI needs to be more investor friendly, more approachable than just another government institution that we all need to just get past. Use of technology in the government sector, we need to introduce this. More technology-based solutions, which will enable the government to provide more efficient service. Then I think policymakers may also need to focus on, as I mentioned this before, on seriously focus on reducing government expenditure than just focusing on increasing tax revenue. I mean, now, for example, the VAT threshold has been reduced from 300 million to a very low amount, right? So this is invariably going to expand the tax base. So with that, don't you think that the VAT rate should be reduced? There are more in the tax net. So I think my personal opinion is that the VAT rate is too high. We need to reduce this a little bit. So, and also there is talk of a wealth tax that might be imposed. In the interim budget also, we thought that the government might introduce a capital gains tax on the trading of listed shares. So we don't want to see that. I mean, the people are burdened in a huge way, in a significant way. So those are my thoughts on the budget proposals for 2023, which will be presented, of course, hopefully in the month of November.
You gave comprehensive insight into the recently proposed interim budget and explained how to navigate through all the enactments. Thank you, Ashane.
Thank you. Good night.
And that's all from us. Good night.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
Thank you for watching and stay safe.